First Contact's fatal mistake. The Cathari warships emerged from hyperspace like obsidian arrows piercing the void, their crystalline hulls reflecting the distant starlight. Admiral Zexthor stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dawn, his 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display of the human mining colony below. Epsilon 7. They called it. A meaningless designation for what the humans considered a valuable helium-3 extraction facility on a frozen moon. Primitive, Zexthor muttered, his secondary breathing chambers expanding with contempt. The scattered thermal signatures of the human settlement barely registered on his advanced sensors. Their defensive capabilities appeared to be little more than basic shield generators and a handful of automated turrets. This would be easier than culling spine mites from a juvenile's carapace. The Cathari Empire had conquered 17 species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Each victory had further convinced them of their technological and evolutionary superiority. Humanity would be the 18th, a footnote in their grand history of expansion. Begin the standard subjugation protocol, Zexthor commanded, his voice resonating through the ship's neural network. No need to waste our advanced weaponry on such primitive defenses. The first salvos from his fleet's primary weapons streaked toward the colony's shield generators. The impacts were precise, calculated, and completely ineffective. The shields flickered but held firm, their composition somehow different from anything the Cathari had encountered before. Zexthor's membrane ridges tightened in confusion. Impossible, he hissed. Scan those shields again. What are we dealing with? Before his officers could respond, the void erupted with activity. Hundreds of small, seemingly inconsequential objects detached from the colony's surface. The Cathari's advanced sensors struggled to track them. They appeared to be little more than debris, mining waste perhaps, but they moved with purpose. Admiral, his second-in-command's voice wavered. We're detecting unusual energy signatures. They're everywhere. The debris cloud suddenly transformed. Each piece revealed itself to be a microdrone, barely larger than a human hand, but powered by experimental quantum cores. They swarmed around the Cathari ships like angry insects, their energy signatures overwhelming the aliens' sophisticated targeting systems. Zexthor watched in horror as his fleet's neural networks began to fail. The humans had somehow weaponized their mining technology, turning simple extraction drones into weapons that could infiltrate and disable ships from within. The drones carried specialized electromagnetic pulses that exploited previously unknown vulnerabilities in Cathari technology. Primitive, a human voice crackled through their compromised communication systems. Perhaps, but we learned long ago that the most effective weapons aren't always the most sophisticated ones. The voice belonged to Commander Sarah Chen, architect of humanity's defensive strategy. While the Cathari had been perfecting their energy weapons and neural interfaces, humanity had been developing countermeasures based on surprisingly simple principles. The mining drones had been retrofitted with electromagnetic pulse generators that could penetrate the crystalline hulls of Cathari ships through their own natural resonance frequencies. Zexthor's flagship shuddered as systems began to fail across all decks. The neural network that controlled everything from life support to weapons was being systematically dismantled by these impossible human devices. His crew, so dependent on their advanced technology, found themselves unable to respond effectively to such a primitive yet devastating attack. Full retreat, Zexthor ordered, but it was too late. The drones had already disabled their main engines. Ship after ship in his once proud fleet went dark, their crystalline hulls now nothing more than beautiful, useless shells floating in space. Commander Chen's voice came through once more. Consider this a lesson, Admiral. Humanity doesn't need to match your technology to defeat it. We just need to understand it better than you do. As Zexthor stood in his darkened command center, watching his fleet become disabled by technology he had dismissed as primitive, he realized the fatal error of the Cathari Empire. They had assumed that advancement meant complexity, that superiority meant sophistication. But humanity had proven that true innovation often meant finding elegantly simple solutions to complex problems. The battle for Epsilon 7 lasted less than 30 minutes. Not a single human life was lost. Not a single shot was fired from their primitive weapons. Instead, humanity had turned the Ketheri's greatest strength, their reliance on advanced technology, into their greatest weakness. As rescue pods ejected from his dying flagship, Zexthor knew that this defeat would send shockwaves through the Empire. The humans hadn't just defended their colony, they had shattered the myth of Ketheri invincibility. And they had done it not with superior firepower or advanced technology, but with ingenuity, resourcefulness, and an understanding that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective ones. This was only the beginning. The Ketheri Empire would soon learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their ability to adapt, to innovate, and to turn their adversaries' strengths against them. The age of easy conquests was over. The humans had made sure of that. The Silent Protocol. News of the Epsilon 7 defeat spread through the Ketheri Empire like a quantum shockwave. For the first time in centuries, the species that had dominated 3 spiral arms of the galaxy found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't comprehend. In the weeks that followed, the Ketheri High Command gathered in their crystalline citadel on their homeworld, Kethar Prime, desperate to understand how a seemingly inferior species had so thoroughly dismantled their most advanced battle fleet. Meanwhile, deep within the asteroid belt of the Sol system, humanity was preparing for the inevitable counterattack. The cavernous chambers of Olympus Station hummed with activity as Dr. Elena Rodriguez supervised the final tests of what would become humanity's most ambitious defense project, the Silent Protocol. The Ketheri's greatest weakness, Dr. Rodriguez explained to the assembled military leadership, isn't in their technology. It's in their inability to conceive of technological regression as a tactical advantage. Her hands danced across the holographic display, showing the internal workings of their new defensive system. The Silent Protocol was, in many ways, the opposite of what anyone would expect from an advanced defensive system. Instead of trying to match or exceed Ketheri technology, it worked by creating zones of forced technological simplification. Within these zones, any system more advanced than basic mechanical operations would simply cease to function. General Marcus Wade, still skeptical despite the success at Epsilon 7, leaned forward in his chair. "You're telling me we're going to defend Earth by making technology not work? That seems counterintuitive." Rodriguez smiled. "That's exactly why it will work. The Ketheri have evolved to be completely dependent on their neural networks and quantum systems. They've forgotten how to function without them. But humans remember." The demonstration chamber activated, and everyone watched as a replica of a Ketheri neural interface simply shut down within the protocol's field. But a simple mechanical pistol, a manual air pump, and even an ancient radio continued to function perfectly. "We're not just developing a weapon," Rodriguez continued. "We're creating zones where the playing field isn't just leveled, it's reversed. In these areas, human ingenuity and our ability to operate with basic technology becomes our greatest advantage." The Silent Protocol was rapidly deployed throughout the solar system, disguised within the existing infrastructure of mining operations and communication arrays. The beauty of the system was its simplicity. It required minimal power and was virtually undetectable by advanced scanning systems precisely because it operated on such basic principles. 3 weeks later, the Ketheri launched their counterattack. A fleet 3 times the size of the one at Epsilon 7 emerged from hyperspace near Mars, led by Grand Admiral Vexnor himself. The crystalline ships moved in perfect formation, their neural networks coordinating with a precision that had overwhelmed countless civilizations before. Primitive humans, Vexnor's transmission boomed across all frequencies. "Your victory at Epsilon 7 was a fluke. You faced the full might of the Ketheri Empire. Surrender now, and we will be merciful." The response came not in words, but in silence. As the Ketheri fleet crossed the boundary of the protocol's range, Their ships began to go dark. Neural networks crashed. Quantum weapons powered down. The most advanced fleet in known space was reduced to little more than crystalline hulks drifting in the void. Panic spread through the Cathari ranks as they found themselves stripped of the technology they depended on. But worse was to come. From behind Phobos and Deimos emerged humanity's response. Ships that seemed to belong in a museum. Retrofitted naval vessels, their hulls stripped of all advanced technology, powered by nothing more complex than nuclear engines, and controlled entirely by manual systems. The battle that followed wasn't the elegant dance of energy weapons and quantum torpedoes that the Cathari had mastered over centuries. Instead, it was a brutal, close-quarters engagement fought with kinetic weapons, traditional explosives, and human crews who had trained extensively to operate without computer assistance. Vexner watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by weapons that his civilization had considered obsolete for millennia. The humans had turned their technological inequality into an advantage, forcing the battlefield to operate on their terms. As his flagship's systems continued to fail, Vexnor received one final transmission from the human forces. "Consider this our counter-proposal, Admiral. The age of overwhelming technological superiority is over. Welcome to a new kind of warfare." The Battle of Mars, as it would come to be known, marked a fundamental shift in the conflict. The Cathari Empire had just learned that their advancement had become their vulnerability, and humanity's perceived primitive nature was actually their greatest strength. As escape pods launched from the crippled Cathari vessels, the message was clear. This war would not be won by the side with the most advanced technology, but by the one most capable of adapting to its absence. The silent protocol had changed everything. And this was only the beginning of humanity's unconventional response to Cathari aggression. Operation Thunderclap. In the aftermath of the Battle of Mars, humanity's military strategists gathered in the underground war room of New Geneva to plan something unprecedented. An offensive against the Cathari Empire. Admiral Sarah Chen, now promoted after her success at Epsilon 7, stood before a holographic map of known Cathari space, her eyes fixed on their first target, the Proxima Centauri Gateway. "The Cathari have never lost a gateway," she addressed the assembled commanders. "They believe their network of quantum tunneling stations is impregnable. That belief ends today." Operation Thunderclap was unlike any military campaign in human history. Instead of a massive fleet engagement, it would rely on small, independently operating teams using technology so basic that the Cathari's advanced detection systems would dismiss them as background noise. Captain James Rodriguez, commanding the lead striker vessel Shadow Walker, knew the stakes. His ship, an experimental hybrid of 20th century stealth technology and minimal modern systems, looked more like a relic than a warship. But that was exactly the point. "Remember," he briefed his crew as they prepared for the jump, "once we're inside the silent protocol's radius, we're operating on basic systems only. Every crew member needs to be ready to perform their duties manually, just like we trained." The first phase began with a seeming tragedy. A damaged human mining vessel, limping toward the Proxima Gateway, broadcasting distress signals on outdated frequencies. The Cathari defenders, their arrogance somewhat tempered by recent defeats but still intact, detected nothing unusual about the ship's primitive systems. Station Commander Yexhal authorized the vessel to dock, seeing an opportunity to demonstrate Cathari magnanimity by rescuing the crew of this damaged human ship. It was a decision that would haunt him for the remainder of his considerably shortened career. The moment the mining vessel was inside the station's docking bay, it activated a localized silent protocol generator. The effect was instantaneous. The gateway station's quantum systems crashed, its neural networks went dark, and the Cathari crew found themselves trapped in a technological dark age. That's when the Shadow Walker and its sister ships emerged from hiding within the mining vessel's massive ore containers. The human strike teams, equipped with nothing more sophisticated than ballistic weapons and mechanical tools, swarmed into the station. The Cathari defenders, trained to rely on neural-linked weapons and AI-assisted combat systems, found themselves facing humans who had specifically trained for close-quarter combat without technological assistance. They never considered this possibility, Rodriguez thought as he led his team through the crystalline corridors. They never imagined anyone would choose to fight this way. The station's capture took less than 2 hours. The Cathari defenders, unable to coordinate without their neural networks and unfamiliar with basic combat techniques, were quickly overwhelmed. Human engineers, working with pre-planned mechanical systems, began the process of converting the gateway into a forward base for further operations. But Operation Thunderclap was far from over. Similar scenes were playing out across 6 other gateway stations in neighboring systems. The Cathari's pride in their advanced technology had led them to standardize their defenses across their entire network. Once humans had figured out how to defeat one station, they could defeat them all. The real genius of the operation became apparent when the Cathari finally mounted their response. Their reinforcement fleets, arriving at the captured gateways, found themselves caught in expanding bubbles of technological regression. The silent protocol, now installed throughout the gateway network, created a cascading effect that trapped Cathari ships in zones where their advanced technology was useless. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as reports came in from all 7 targets. The beauty of this operation, she explained to her staff, is that we're not just capturing their gateways. We're turning their own network against them. Each station we take becomes a dead zone for their technology, creating a barrier they can't cross without fundamentally changing how they fight. The psychological impact on the Cathari was devastating. Their quantum gateway network, the pride of their empire and the backbone of their military superiority, had been transformed into a weapon against them. Worse, they had been defeated not by a technologically superior force, but by humans using tactics and technology that the Cathari had considered obsolete for generations. As news of Operation Thunderclap spread through the Empire, the Cathari High Command faced a horrifying realization. The humans weren't just fighting to defend themselves. They were systematically dismantling the technological advantages that had made the Cathari Empire seemingly invincible. In the debris-strewn docking bay of the Proxima Gateway, Captain Rodriguez looked out at the stars through a simple glass viewport. No neural interfaces, no quantum enhancements, just human eyes gazing into space. Sometimes, he mused to his executive officer, the best way forward is to take a step back. The success of Operation Thunderclap marked a turning point in the war. The Cathari Empire, for the first time in its history, found itself forced to contemplate the unthinkable, the possibility that their technological superiority had become their greatest weakness, and that their conquest of humanity might be beyond their capabilities. The mind game. High above Cathar Prime, in the crystalline spires of the Imperial Palace, the Cathari High Command faced their greatest crisis in 10,000 years of recorded history. Supreme Overlord Zexthar, his iridescent scales dulled with stress, watched the holographic representation of their shrinking empire with all 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. How? He demanded of his assembled advisors. How do these humans continue to defeat our most advanced systems with technology that barely qualifies as modern? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vexley, a xenopsychologist who had spent years studying captured human databases, stepped forward. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with a dawning realization that would shake the foundations of Cathari society. "My lord, we have been asking the wrong question," she began. "The issue isn't their technology, it's their mindset. The humans haven't just adapted their technology to fight us, they've adapted their entire way of thinking." The revelation sparked a fundamental shift in the Cathari approach to the war. For the first time, they began to study not just human technology, but human history. What they found terrified them more than any weapon could. Humanity, they discovered, had spent most of its history fighting itself. Each new technology had been met with countermeasures, each advantage eventually neutralized by innovation or adaptation. Unlike the Cathari, who had evolved their technology in a relatively straight line, Humans had explored countless parallel paths, often maintaining knowledge of older systems even as they developed new ones. Meanwhile, in the orbital shipyards above Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team were pushing this advantage even further. The newly commissioned PSI-OPS division wasn't developing weapons. They were developing scenarios. The Ketheri have always believed that advancement only moves in one direction, Rodriguez explained to her team. We need to show them just how wrong they are. Operation Mindstorm launched quietly, almost imperceptibly. Human forces began leaving deliberately flawed pieces of advanced technology for the Ketheri to find. Each device appeared to be a failed attempt to match Ketheri technology, but contained hidden lessons that would reshape their enemies' understanding of warfare. The first such device was discovered in the ruins of a captured research station. It appeared to be a primitive attempt at replicating Ketheri neural interface technology. The Ketheri engineers who studied it were initially amused by its simplicity, until they realized that it continued functioning even within silent protocol fields. This discovery sent shockwaves through the Ketheri military. They had assumed that the silent protocol was an absolute barrier to advanced technology. The idea that humans might be developing ways to bridge the gap between primitive and advanced systems threatened the very foundation of their tactical doctrine. But this was exactly what Rodriguez and her team had intended. The device wasn't actually a breakthrough in neural interface technology. It was a carefully crafted psychological weapon. Its apparent functionality within silent protocol fields was achieved through deliberately primitive means, designed to force the Ketheri to question everything they thought they knew about technological progression. The beauty of psychological warfare, Rodriguez noted in her classified reports, is that once you plant the seed of doubt, your enemy does most of the work for you. The impact on Ketheri military operations was profound. Commanders began hesitating before engaging human forces, unsure whether they were facing genuine technological regression or some new, incomprehensible strategy. Their once fluid tactical decisions became bogged down in second-guessing and overcautious analysis. This hesitation proved costly during the Battle of Arcturus Gate. A Ketheri fleet, detecting what appeared to be advanced energy signatures from a human task force, spent crucial hours analyzing the readings for hidden tricks. By the time they realized the signatures were merely clever decoys created with 19th-century Tesla coil technology, human forces had already outflanked and trapped them. In the Imperial Palace, Dr. Vexley presented her most disturbing conclusion yet to the High Command. The humans aren't trying to win a technological war, she explained. They're forcing us to fight a kind of war we've never experienced, one where technological superiority isn't just irrelevant, it's a liability. The psychological impact extended beyond the military. Ketheri society, built on the assumption of their technological supremacy, began to show cracks. Young Ketheri started questioning the Empire's reliance on advanced technology. Some even began secretly studying human history, fascinated by a species that had found strength in technological diversity rather than linear advancement. As the fourth year of the war drew to a close, humanity had achieved something far more significant than military victories. They had forced one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations to confront the limitations of their own progress. In her private quarters aboard the research station Prometheus, Dr. Rodriguez reviewed the latest psychological warfare assessments. The Ketheri's greatest defeat, she wrote in her journal, wasn't losing battles to our primitive weapons. It was realizing that their definition of advancement had become their prison, while our supposed primitive nature had given us the freedom to innovate in ways they couldn't imagine. The mind game was working, reshaping the conflict in ways that no conventional military strategy could have achieved. But as human forces prepared for their next major offensive, a question lingered. How would the Ketheri respond when they finally realized that their entire civilization might need to unlearn everything they thought they knew about progress? Dawn of a new era. The great crystalline halls of the Ketheri High Council Chamber, once a symbol of technological supremacy, now felt oddly hollow. Supreme Overlord Zexthar stood before the assembled leaders of his species, their iridescent scales dimmed with the weight of the decision they faced. The war with humanity had reached its turning point, but not in the way anyone had expected. "We did not lose this war on the battlefield." Zexthar's voice resonated through the chamber. "We lost it in our minds the moment we became prisoners of our own advancement." The admission sent ripples through the assembled council. On the massive holographic display behind him, tactical data showed the current state of the conflict. Nearly 40% of their gateway network had been transformed into silent protocol zones, creating an ever-expanding barrier that their advanced ships couldn't penetrate. But more devastating than the territorial losses was the cultural transformation sweeping through Ketheri society. Young Ketheri had begun experimenting with simplified technology, fascinated by the versatility and resilience demonstrated by human approaches. Underground markets had emerged trading in primitive mechanical devices that could function without neural networks. Some military units had even started training to operate without their advanced systems, though these efforts were often clumsy and inefficient. Meanwhile, aboard the Earth ship Prometheus, Admiral Sarah Chen received the unexpected transmission from Kethar Prime. The message was surprisingly simple. The Ketheri Empire wanted to talk. The meeting location chosen was symbolic, the Epsilon 7 mining colony where the conflict had begun. This time, however, the Ketheri delegation arrived in ships that were noticeably different. Gone were the purely crystalline hulls and fully neural integrated systems. Instead, their vessels displayed a hybrid approach, combining their advanced technology with more robust, simple backup systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic advisor, stood beside Admiral Chen as they waited in the colony's main conference chamber. "They're already changing," she observed, noting the modified environmental suits worn by the approaching Ketheri delegation. "The question is whether they understand how much further the change needs to go." Supreme Overlord Zexthar himself led the Ketheri delegation, a break from thousands of years of diplomatic protocol. As he entered the chamber, his guards carried simple mechanical weapons alongside their neural-linked ones, a sight that would have been unthinkable just years earlier. "Humanity has taught us a harsh but necessary lesson," Zexthar began, his translator device noticeably less elaborate than the ones used before the war. "We assumed that advancement meant moving forever forward in a single direction. You showed us that true advancement means maintaining the wisdom to step backward when necessary." The negotiations that followed weren't just about ending the war. They were about reshaping the future of both species. The Ketheri offered to share their advanced technology, but for the first time in their history, they also expressed interest in learning from another species. They wanted to understand how humans maintained their technological versatility, how they kept alive the knowledge of older systems while developing new ones. Humanity, in turn, agreed to help the Ketheri develop what they called technological resilience, the ability to function across multiple levels of technological sophistication. The silent protocol zones would be gradually reduced, but some would be maintained as joint training areas where both species could practice operating under technological constraints. But the most profound changes were cultural. The Ketheri began a massive effort to preserve and document their own technological history, realizing that in their rush to advance, they had lost much of their understanding of fundamental principles. Human educators were invited to Ketheri worlds to help establish new training programs that emphasized understanding technology at all levels, not just its most advanced forms. 5 years after the war's end, the changes were evident throughout both civilizations. Human ships now incorporated some Ketheri technology, but always with mechanical backups and alternative systems. Ketheri vessels, while still more advanced, carried redundant simple systems and crews trained to use them. The silent protocol, once a weapon, had become a tool for innovation, used in controlled zones where engineers from both species worked to develop technologies that could bridge the gap between different technological levels. In the academy that had been established on Epsilon 7, now a symbol of cooperation rather than conflict, Dr. Rodriguez watched as human and Ketheri students worked together in a silent protocol chamber. The humans were teaching their alien counterparts the principles of mechanical engineering, while the Ketheri shared insights about how these simple systems could be enhanced without becoming overly dependent on advanced technology. The real victory, she noted in her final report to Earth's Council, wasn't in proving our way was better. It was in showing that there isn't just one way forward. True advancement doesn't mean abandoning the past. It means building a future that can draw from all levels of technological understanding. The war had ended, but its lessons would reshape both civilizations for generations to come. The Ketheri Empire, once defined by its relentless march toward advancement, had learned to value technological diversity. Humanity, while maintaining its adaptability, gained access to new levels of technological achievement without sacrificing its fundamental resilience. As the first joint human-Ketheri exploration fleet prepared to venture into unknown space, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Hope Horizon, a ship that embodied the principles both species had learned. Its hybrid systems represented not just a compromise between two approaches to technology, but a new understanding of what it meant to advance. We thought we were fighting a war, she mused to her Ketheri counterpart. But we were really building a bridge, not just between our species, but between different ways of thinking about progress itself. The dawn of this new era brought with it challenges and opportunities neither species could have imagined before their conflict. But as they faced the unknown together, both humans and Ketheri did so with a deeper understanding that true strength lies not in the level of technology one possesses, but in the wisdom to know when and how to use it.